All right, Jim, our next one here, also sent on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru. From G, he sent an article from...
Is his last name Wiz or Willikers?
G sent a article from the Sportster, wanted to get your thoughts. 10 mistakes AEW has already made in 2022.
Okay, so they just boiled it down to the top 10 rather than doing a complete list.
That's right. Already made. It is about to be May, so I don't know if already still applies here, but number 10, the start of Thunder Rosa's AEW women's title reign. Thunder Rosa's title victory was a long time coming, with a huge win over Britt Baker in a steel cage match, following on from their classic last year, it does say. Baker's reign had run its course, and now it was time for a change. However, after an emotional victory, AEW began Rosa's reign with an interrupted promo segment being ambushed by Nyla Rose. Whilst her talents have never been in question, Nyla Rose has spent a lot of time challenging for the women's title, and to kick off a brand new reign with the same old hurdles, especially with how blandly it was built, has stunted Rosa's momentum.
Well, besides that, everybody's already seen Thunder Rosa bouncing around for a 98-pound Japanese middle schooler, and she's been beaten like a drum.
Nyla Rose,
yes. Remember, goddamn, what was...
Riho.
Couldn't call it, thank God. I finally was able to forget, and then you reminded me again. Riho beat her like a drum. It's been years. She's been non-effective in any way. So, yeah, and then Thunder Rosa wins the title, gets jumped by Nyla Rose. Otherwise, have we seen the new women's champion besides in that one match over the last couple of months?
She was doing something recently, but let's get to number 9 here on the list of the mistakes AEW has made this year already. The Sammy Guevara and Ty Conti on-screen relationship. During his time with the Inner Circle, and subsequently his TNT title reign, Guevara was getting hugely over with the audience. However, when his real-life relationship with Ty Conti was brought on screen, he has lost a lot of fans. That is how that sentence is written. This has led to what looks to be a forced heel turn due to the crowd's reactions, which is certainly a shame, considering how popular both Guevara and Conti were as babyfaces. A heel turn will work, but their entire feud with Dan Lambert has felt awkward.
We've been talking about this. I mean, everybody's noticed. And Sammy shot himself in the foot with his girlfriend, putting her with him on camera on television. If he'd have stuck with the one that he proposed to, then, she was, as we've mentioned, non-threatening. She wasn't a heel personality on the television, or a personality on the television at all. And, he looked like a nice guy with a nice girlfriend. Now he looks like he's lost his head and become a celebrity, and he's got that natural heat-getting fucking slappable face to begin with, and now he's walking around with, Miss Bitch face that could get heat in an ice flow, and they're, doing the fucking tonguey turtle thing with each other. So, yes, of course, people despise him. They want to throw rocks at him, but you would have done this on purpose to turn heel like that. You would have done this on purpose if you wanted to be a heel, but I'm not sure. I still don't think that any of them were smart enough to realize what he was doing to himself until they'd already done it.
Number 8, inconsistent booking. What the fuck is that?
That's another goddamn gravel truck.
Oh, I thought that was on my side. Holy shit.
No.
Number 8, inconsistent booking for some wrestlers. With AEW's roster size, it allows them to have a sort of conveyor belt system.
I can't hear you, bro.
With AEW's roster size, it allows them to have a sort of conveyor belt system in which certain wrestlers can take time off, with stories getting longer to play out. However, with this huge roster, it also means that certain names aren't as featured and get lost in the shuffle. In 2022, many popular and talented names have lost a lot of momentum and done little of note. For example, the likes of the Dark Order, Ruby Soho, Best Friends, House of Black, Pac, Layla Hirsch, and several others have all gone missing at times.
And actually, everybody but one that he just mentioned, that was a good thing.
Yeah, by the way,
they've gone missing.
You left off Miro. That's the big one. You want to talk about someone who was primed for a bigger move in AEW and disappeared. They may have matches here and there and a few seconds of screen time, but they feel like afterthoughts currently.
What was his quote? The stories have longer to, was it develop or play out? Or how did he say that?
Longer to play out, with stories getting longer to play out.
Okay, that'd be great if the story didn't stop in the middle. How often do you read a book, but you go the first 8 chapters, then you put it down for 4 months, then you come back and pick up where you left off and enjoy it just as much, even though you can't remember what the fuck you've read 4 months ago? That's the fucking problem. Because Tony didn't have a game plan for the type of talent and the style of talent and to fill his roster when he started out and to put people in specific positions, he just signed up a bunch of wrestlers. Whether they would be complementary with each other was secondary to him or complementary to a particular focused style and presentation that he wanted to make. Then, because he feels like he needs to rotate everybody in and out to give them enough TV time, he'll start shit with people, and then you just won't see him for a long time. So the stories don't have longer to play out. The stories have more time for you to forget what the fucking story was. Again, until you're not going to get any type of mass audience watching something that they have to take notes on and read the internet for and do research for in their regular lives because they don't have time. If you're not telling them in your 2 hours, assume they're not gonna fucking know. Because the only people that care enough about this lackluster, phony-looking horse shit that everybody calls pro wrestling these days to fucking get on the internet, take notes, remember minute details are either people like us that make money off of doing it or people that have no fucking life. And that gets us down to about the fucking pool of available AEW fans right now. Because I guarantee you, not even the sorry, insignificant 2 million people that are watching the WWE these days, I guarantee you half of them ain't going to do research at length on the internet and or seek out video of the new arrivals in the WWE's previous matches so that they'll be all prepared for what they did in fucking Japan.
Number 7. Lights out moments.
Fucking hell, just stop there. Yes, stop it now. Pay your light bill.
They do abuse it a lot. They just did it with Satnam Singh's debut, and the House of Black have the ability, it seems, to turn out the lights, and Darby's turned out the lights, and too many people.
Sting turns out the lights.
All right, well, let's go to number 6. Not improving the women's division. Once again, this is mistakes AEW has made this year. Upon AEW's move to TBS, and also when crowning a mid-card women's champion, it could have been a fresh start when it comes to giving the women's division more time. However,
good Lord, he wants to give that women's division more time?
However, nothing has really changed. There have been a few more feuds here and there, but they get 30 seconds worth of build on Dynamite, with the storylines having very little substance. This is perhaps AEW's biggest issue, and things need to start changing.
I got news for you. AEW has a lot of issues much bigger than anything to do with the girls' matches. They got major systemic structural fucking issues that have much more important things to do than the girls' matches. But I will agree with the author here that they could have done something, but that was a long time ago because what they did was they just decided they were going to have a women's division without having almost any good women. and they had to rely on Twinkle Toes's fucking Japanese mud show girls and the imitation Freddie Mercury's and a lot of indie girls that you'd never seen or heard of before that weren't ready for television. And they dropped the ball with Nyla Rose, as we said, and that's way, way too late. She needs to go away for a few years, come back, and people forgot and start fresh. Britt Baker has been and where's Serena Deeb? Serena's injured, isn't she?
No, she has this week on Dynamite, a Philadelphia street fight with Hikaru Shida.
Oh, good fucking God. All right. And then they do shit like that. Because they're in Philadelphia, have a Philadelphia street fight with these two girls just because they're in Philadelphia, and also having girls' garbage matches and girls' blood match, whatever the fuck. They didn't have any talented girls to start their division. And then when they got a few talented ones, they've garbaged it up like the guys so that it's no different. It's just not as good because they're girls instead of guys. And let's face it, I'm sorry. I hate to hurt anybody's feelings. That's just the way it is. So there you go. Yeah, they botched that too.
Number 5, some never-ending feuds. AEW does long-term storytelling quite well.
What? Wait, what? All right, go ahead.
But on occasion, some rivalries continue without a lot of development. For example, Andrade El Idolo, Matt Hardy, Darby Allin, and Sting have been intertwined for several months now. And though Hardy was kicked out of the family office, such a funny sentence, there have been no other real developments. Jurassic Express have also been feuding with the Elite in several different forms, dating all the way back to before All Out 2021. The matches are never bad, but there are enough teams on the roster to freshen up feuds for both sides. Unless you only want to work with your friends.
Yeah, and again, long-term storytelling. I don't know what's funnier, that the fans of AEW think that that's what they're doing, or that the people running AEW think that's what they're doing. This long-term storytelling thing. It's a goddamn mess. From week to week, it's an incoherent mess. And after 6 months or a year, they end up where you knew they were going to go anyway, because that's what Tony's little EVPs wanted to do. And they get there. That's not long-term storytelling. Long-term storytelling would be if the shit made sense from week to week, month to month, and year to year, and then you did something. Dusty Rhodes telling Ole Anderson, it will never be over. You know what? That's because that was long-term storytelling, because they goddamn kept people interested in their rivalry and or actions for several years back and forth, even when Ole switched babyface and insinuated himself into Dusty's presence and good graces, etc., over a period of a year and a half before he'd finally speak to him, blah, blah, blah. That's long-term storytelling, because everything they did in between the start and the finish did make actual sense instead of just being nonsense that didn't apply to the result that they were trying to get to begin with. And then they got there anyway. You see what I'm saying? No, you don't, because it don't make any sense. Because we're talking about something that doesn't make any sense.
Speaking of doesn't make any sense, number 4 on the list, the interim TNT champion. Cody Rhodes began the year as TNT champion, but was forced to take some time off due to COVID. In the meantime...
2 weeks! Was it 10 days?
Well, in the meantime, AEW crowned an interim TNT champion, even though Rhodes was absent for just 2 weeks. There we go. This led to an illogical period of having 2 TNT champions, and it made no sense at all. AEW didn't need to do this, and it sets a potentially bad precedent for what could come in the future if a champion has to spend a week or two off TV. AEW needs...
Well, no, that's one thing now. It doesn't matter what precedent they're setting, because they'll just ignore the precedent if it doesn't fit what they want to do then. So that's no problem there. They'll just ignore it.
Well,
because nothing makes sense from... There is no set parameters and standards for how to treat any situation in AEW. They just make it up as they go along.
Well, let me finish this paragraph here, and this is verbatim. AEW need to not do this again. Let's see, I'll go to number 3. Number 3 on the list of AEW's mistakes this year, a lot of blood. Blood can often help a match reach the next level. For example, had Steve Austin not bled in his match with Bret Hart, his moment won't have been as legendary. This must be someone with English as a second language. More recently, Wheeler Yuta's use of blood in his match with Jon Moxley helped him.
That's the only time that Wheeler Yuta will be grouped in the same mention with Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Helped him become a star in one night. However, many of AEW's matches this year have already used a lot of blood, and at times it can feel unnecessary, especially when it is seen so often. It is only April, and several big matches have incorporated blading. If it doesn't slow down, the impact of blood will lessen over time. I am curious what you think about this in terms of modern wrestling. Could there be too much blood?
Yes. Because here's the thing again. There was tons of blood in the territories, but only when you paid to see it. How many times was there blood on television? Only in an angle that set up a match that people wanted to pay to see. And because you, as a wrestling fan in Raleigh, North Carolina, went to the matches every Wednesday night, and in one match on each card, maybe they'd skip a week sometimes, but somebody out of 6 or 7 matches, somebody would bleed that night. And then maybe next week you might not have any. Next week maybe you'd have 2 guys. It just depends, whatever. But that wasn't overdone in the overall scheme of things. Because you're watching an hour of wrestling every week on television. You're seeing a 2-hour show every Wednesday night. It's not a lot. But when the only thing you're watching is the television show, because there is no ability to go to live wrestling anymore, because people lose fucking money trying to promote live wrestling because we've killed the business. So that means that you're just seeing the TV and you're seeing blood constantly, and it's not even shit you have to pay to see. It's not even on a pay-per-view. And people are smarter than ever. Most of the guys are worse at getting juice than ever. So occasionally, it'll still have the desired effect, like in Punk and MJF. But most of the time, it's just more of this garbage match, death match, gimmick match, furniture match, horse shit. And they're lolling around in barbed wire and rolling around in fucking broken furniture. So, yeah, the individual guys, the individual wrestlers in the territory days, wherever you were working, you got juice 20 times more per, well, that's not even correct. What do you think? Does anything but a garbage deathmatch wrestler now, does anybody bleed more than a couple of times a year anymore? Any individual?
Well, I mean, CM Punk has a few times now.
Punk has a few, but the point
Britt
is,
Baker has a few times.
Okay, I go, Jesus Christ, one of the girls too. I guarantee you, Bobby Eaton probably got juice when we were featured on top against Dusty, the Road Warriors, Rock and Roll Express, 1986. He probably bled 60 or 75 times. Probably. That's more than any single wrestler will do today in the same year, but...
How many wrestlers have that many matches in the same year anymore?
Well, I mean, yeah, we had a 350, so counting TV matches and double shots and everything as we've gone over that, 300 and something. But the thing is, the fans, none of the same fans saw him bleed more than 3 or 4 times. Probably in Philadelphia, I bet you he bled, if we were there 12 times that year, he probably bled on 4 or 5 of them. But that's the individual guys that were main event guys were doing it more, but people weren't seeing it as often. And now between the ridiculousness of the garbage death matches, which have killed so much about the entire business, anytime you see something like that, it hurts professional wrestling just visually, because then you say, okay, not only are they bleeding ridiculous amounts, but they're obviously helping each other do it. It's a performance. It's a display of freak showishness, and they're cooperating, and this is garbage. And that's the picture you get of it. Instead of two guys in a fight and somebody gets fucking busted with a chair or run into a post or punched in the face or whatever, all this shit, and your emotions are up because this is a fight and the stakes have been raised, instead of just, it's more of that shit that those garbage guys do. So, yeah, the blood is overdone on their television because it's allowed too often, and it's people doing it that are allowed to do it, that it ain't gonna matter if they bleed or are set on fire in some cases. It ain't gonna help anything. Save it for the world title match, save it for Punk, save it for top talent and people that can do it well instead of, obviously. That's my opinion.
Number 2 on this list, once again, mistakes AEW has already made in 2022, letting Cody Rhodes leave. Whilst it is true that the company should not have paid more than they saw fit to keep hold of Cody Rhodes, and if both parties were not happy, then the relationship should have ended, but in the long term, letting Rhodes leave could be detrimental. Rhodes has been booked like a complete star in WWE thus far, and with his presentation being so strong, it could lead to more wrestlers leaving AEW to join WWE. When looking at reactions and merch sales, AEW have let WWE have a vital asset in Rhodes.
Well, just from the perception, and I mean, we've talked about Cody at length, and it's currently on the omnibus, folks, but Tony Khan had, and again, this is why Tony Khan's a wonderful friend and a rotten businessman. He's just a wonderful friend to have, but he had an option on Cody. He could have kept him for another year and paid him the money that he's been being paid, but instead they tried to negotiate a new deal and couldn't. And Tony said, well, if he don't want to be here, I don't want him here. Well, in this situation, I wouldn't have been concerned about what Cody Rhodes wanted. This isn't like one of those poor underneath guys that they won't use in the WWE, but they won't let him go either, so they can go do something somewhere. This is a guy that was one of the founding fathers. He was one of Tony's little Mount Rushmore there. Him and Twinkle Toes and the Hardley Boys on Mount Rushmore. They ought to be out in the desert somewhere in South Dakota, but nevertheless. An executive vice president of the company, a guy he's pushed as a star, and they can't get together? If I'd have been Tony, I'd have said, well, here's the thing, Cody. Since this actually was y'all's idea to begin with, and you got me in on it, and I've spent millions of dollars, and I don't want the public perception to be that you just up and left for a bigger company. I don't want egg on my face. I don't want to be embarrassed. So I'm going to exercise your other option. But now here's the deal. You don't need to wrestle for me. I will pay you to stay home. If you're not happy and you don't want to wrestle on this program anymore, then I'll pay you to stay home. But by the time that Vince gets a hold of you, he will not be getting one of my big stars and one of my featured players and one of my executive vice presidents. He's going to be getting Cody Rhodes that I've paid for the last year to do a couple of key jobs and otherwise sit at home and take a shot of brandy. If you think Vince McMahon, which one would Vince McMahon have done if the situation was reversed? Would Vince McMahon have done that? Or would Vince McMahon have done what Tony did and said, oh, if you don't want to be here, go ahead anyway, no worries. We'll get over it, everything's fine. Which one would Vince have done?
Vince would have done whatever could have hurt his competitor.
That's exactly why Vince is still in the business after 40-something years, and Tony Khan looks like he's on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Because Tony's a great friend, Vince is a businessman.
Hey, let me ask you something, because I just thought of it, and I had not thought of it up until now. But WWE, when a guy gets hurt, I think Rey Mysterio, it's happened to several times, they extend the contract.
They do.
It's not
Sometimes they have the right to. They don't always.
They have the right to. Does Tony Khan have the right to? Because your feelings out of the equation. Kenny Omega's been a top guy in that company since the beginning. He was their world champion. He's been out now for months, healing up and getting surgeries. He's going to be out a little bit longer. If you're Tony Khan, seeing what happened with Cody, do you say you want to extend that contract?
Yeah. See, here's the thing. It's not like that Kenny Omega did all this damage on Tony Khan's fucking watch and payroll. He's been doing stupid shit over in Japan for years, taking all those meaningless bumps and all that fucking bullshit that he's torn his body up with, trying to have those classic pieces of art that look like a ballet dancer pretending to be a professional wrestler instead of an actual fight. And then after he works for Tony for 2 years, suddenly he decides to get all this work done. The show's much better without him, so I'm not complaining. But again, if I was Tony Khan, what is he paying Twinkle Toes? And how long has Twinkle Toes been out? Again, when Vince, the WWE does it, they use it as a punitive measure in a lot of cases. When a guy has been hurt, and especially when he got hurt, the specific injury can be traced to their ring. And yes, they pay for the surgery, they pay for the medical, they pay for whatever, and they give the guy time to get back, but then they freeze the contract and you still have that many more months that you were out left on the end of it. That's been used most often as a punitive measure against people that want to leave and didn't want to be fucking injured, and they didn't pick that time to take off and have the elective surgery for the problems that have been nagging them. They were not ambulatory at the time and couldn't fucking go. So, with, again, one of the main event guys that's making more money than almost anybody in the company, and he's been off for months and there's no sign of him coming back, it helps the program. I'm not saying that, but if I was Tony, I'd want to get a little bit better return on my investment, and I would say, hey, I'm not going to pay you your full salary for the past however many months for you to come back for 3 months, use you as a fucking top guy, and then your contract's up and you're going to jack me for more money. When you come back from your goddamn injury, we're going to start a brand new contract that we both agree on for the money and everything else that we want to do, and I'll start you from there. Or if you don't want to sign a new contract, you're going to come back with 4 months left on a 3-year deal or whatever. Maybe you just won't come back. Are they not doing fine without him? The shows have been better.
I'll be honest, I'd rather have him on those shows than Adam Cole. There's a lot of guys on that show. I'd rather have a Kenny Omega match or segment.
Well, if we're talking about individual guys to trade out, I'll go with you on that. But the overall shows have been no worse without him, in some cases better.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Again, he kind of got phased out right around the time of the rise of Punk and those Punk MJF segments, which saved the show for months.
And then Danielson came along and showed what a top guy needs to be, a top heel needs to be, but they didn't capitalize on that.
That was such a brief moment. I forgot all about Danielson's wonderful run on top.
Danielson was better for 6 weeks than Twinkle Toes and Don Fallis were as a poor man's Bobby Heenan and Nick Bockwinkel for 2 fucking years.
Well, let's finish up this list. I agree with you. Number 1, the biggest mistake AEW has already made in 2022, according to the Sportster.
Wait a minute. Hold on. 1 second. 1 second. I'm trying to...
I didn't know if it was going to be that or the farts. Battle of the Belts.
It'll probably be.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
But number 1 is Battle of the Belts. AEW's new show, Battle of the Belts, promised a show full of title matches, with it looking to hopefully feel like a mini pay-per-view event. The first event saw a predictable women's title match, a thrown-together TNT title match, and a match for the FTW title, which felt cheap, as it isn't an official championship. AEW had a chance to rectify this poor show with the second edition, but it featured yet another predictable women's title match, yet another rematch between Scorpio Sky and Sammy Guevara, and a Ring of Honor World title match, which wasn't hyped up or built to. If AEW wants to make this show must-see, then they should feature the world title at the next show.
Well, we just did a long dissertation on what they could have done with the Battle of the Belts versus what they're doing with it. What clip is that on the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel? Do you remember offhand, Mr. Last?
I think it's Jim Cornette Reviews Battle of the Belts.
That might be it. That'd give you a clue right there. Yeah. And again, anything, cooking recipes, viewer call-ins. Let's do WWE Live Wire. Anything would be better than Battle of the Belts. Because that's been it's a show that the network gave them as a consolation prize for moving their network with a signed contract. That's, so we got to give you something. So that the network doesn't care about it. It was a consolation prize. And you would think that the promotion cares about it, but they haven't, because they've made it so lackluster. And there's no reason to make it look like a shorter version of your regular television program.
And it looks just like the other shows. And if you remember with WCW or Crockett Promotions, TV aired on the weekends. The first few clashes aired opposite WrestleMania, but then it was a midweek thing. Yeah. This is the opposite. Dynamite's the midweek live show. The Battle of the Belts special is the one buried on a weekend.
Yes, the Battle of the Belts syndicated specials that Joe Koff did from Florida were syndicated to different television stations, and they aired in different day parts and days. But the Clash of Champions, as you mentioned, after the cable systems ran it off from being competition to WrestleMania because they were all losing money, it was a weeknight thing, because all of Crockett's TV was on the syndicated television was on Saturdays and Sundays, usually during the day. The TBS television was on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights. Friday night Power Hour at 10 o'clock or after the Braves. Saturday night 6:05, Sunday night 6:05. So this was on a Tuesday or a Wednesday night, 8 to 10 p.m. primetime television with main event matches from a major arena somewhere in the country.
Live.
It was like live, which was totally unheard of for wrestling back then on a national basis, except for the NBC Saturday night's main events at that point, blah, blah, blah.
Even those were taped after a while.
Actually, as a matter of fact, you are correct, sir. So it was a live sports special in prime time on a weeknight from a big arena, and everybody had their game face on. Clash of Champions, and the ratings were better for that show than the regular weekly programs, because people saw it as something special. That's why you had, what the bad clashes did 3 or 4 million viewers. The bad ones, Sting and Flair at the first one, what did they close out at over 8 million or 9 million people?
I don't remember the exact number, but
or was it 7.8 million, something like that. Point is, about 4 times what's watching SmackDown and about 8 times what's watching AEW right now. And because those seemed like big shows. Well, now how are they going to put a big show on TV when they drop the cow on everything they do because they have no restraint? The regular weekly show, you've got street fights, blood, mayhem, furniture, angles, traffic accidents. Because they can't get people interested in just their personalities. Most of them have none. I'm done.